Hello, everyone. My name is Ned Dennison. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We've done a number of interviews with crew for course record holders, crew for swimmers with physical disabilities. And I thought it might be interesting to talk to two Virgin crew who were out on the English Channel for their very first time with a swimmer and to get their impressions while they're quite fresh. So Dorothy, please say hello.
Hi, my name is Dorothy, and I'm one of the Sandy Cove Island swimmers, and I crewed my first English Channel swim last week. So first week in September.
And David, say hello.
Yeah, David Merriman, also Sandy Cove swimmer, and I crewed in early August, and again, first time crewing in the channel.
Dorothy, first, tell us about your distance swimming, maybe the year, if you can remember the first time you did a mile, your longest swim, and what you've been doing this year in the water.
Well, I was thinking about that when you sent me those questions earlier. My first mile was probably in about, the early 80s, doing those Irish water safety survival courses down in Ardmore, where one of the first things you had to do was swim. Well, it probably wasn't a mile, it might have been 1,500 meters. And that kind of, we were in a cove, so it wasn't like you were really exposed, but it was very, very cold. And, we were all very skinny kids. So it was a very good introduction to the realities of swimming in the sea in Ireland. Proper swims, I'd say it's only 10 years ago that I got into swimming in the sea. And I was thinking maybe probably a Henley swim or something like that would have been my first sort of longest swim. And then various swims around County Cork, including the Sandy Cove Challenge, would have been my sort of early introduction. I'm not a marathon swimmer yet, but I'm a very experienced open water swimmer. And this year, I haven't done a lot of events. I've just done a lot of swimming in Sandy Cove and a couple of trips. I have been plagued by injuries, so that has put off the date at which I'm finally going to get my first marathon, but I hope it will be next year.
And David, same question?
Yeah, so first mile in the sea, I would say, was around about 2006. And my very, very, the very start of my kind of sea swimming came with the influence of Eilish Burns, who's coached an awful lot of us in Cork. I had been swimming with one of her groups in the pool for a number of years, and I did a swim in East Cork with her and a few others. One day was particularly rough, so it wasn't. We didn't go very far, but I did my very first lap of Sandy Cove with Eilish, just me and her, and so that was definitely a mile. And that was from memory, it was June 06 or June 07. So yeah, that was my first one. And in terms of long distance experience, I have some. I haven't done the English Channel or the Catalina Channel or anything like that. My longest swim, I did Lake Zurich in 2018, which is 26K. I did Lake Windermere in 2019, which I think comes in at about 17K. I did a swim in 2022, I think it was, in the Baltic. It was 14K, and I had to go off swimming Rottnest last November, but I got weathered out halfway there, so I got 10K of the 20K done. So they're kind of my long distance swims, and I'm hoping this year, although it's getting late in the season, that there's a group of us may get a particular 10K swim in early October, which I think, Ned, you know what I'm talking about there. And yeah, so yeah, that's me.
And go back to Dorothy. Dorothy, involvement with English Channel solo swimmers, how many have you met? How many have you swum with? And on a daily, weekly basis, how many of these people do you get in the water with?
Well, on a weekly basis, quite a few. Carol Cashel, Finbar Hederman, Brian Foster recently, Ned Dennison. The people in Sandy Cove who
Rob O'Han.
Sorry, Rob. The people in Sandy Cove who've swum the channel, I obviously swim with all the time. And then I've been involved in Cork Distance Week in the last few years. I describe myself as a swimming groupie there because I kind of swim a bit, help a bit, host a bit. And obviously you meet all these incredibly inspiring people who are doing amazing things in the sea. So I've met a lot of channel swimmers over the last, particularly 3 or 4 years.
And they're all younger than you, really good looking, great shoulders, slim, fast, intelligent, nice.
Well, that's just the Sandy Cove swimmers. The others, it's more of a mixed bag.
David, same question
Yeah.
for you. And then
Yeah.
include the winter in the pool, David, for you.
Yeah. I mean, just lots of because I've been involved in both the pool group in the winter and then Sandy Cove and so on. There's just, I mean, just within our own group, there must be a dozen, maybe even more, who've swam the English Channel. Obviously, we all know Lisa Cummins, who did a 2-way, which is particularly impressive and kind of unique. And Lisa also did a double Manhattan. And then through Distance Week over the years, and I always joke, Ned, that I've been at more distance weeks than you, but just the number of people I know through Distance Week who've swum the English Channel. I mean, Matthias Kastner, Tracy Clark, Michael Payne, just so many people. I'm forgetting loads, but yeah, and we meet so many amazing swimmers who've done the Channel, Triple Crown, etc. at the CDW Cork Distance Week dinner every year. So yeah, just lots of I think Dorothy hit the nail on the head. Inspiring swimmers, really, who we get to mix with regularly in Sandy Cove and annually at Distance Week. So yeah, many.
David, let's start with you for these next questions. How did you get invited on this English Channel solo swim? How well did you know the swimmer? How well did you know the other people on the crew? Just give us the kind of history of how it happened.
Yeah, so both the swimmer and the other people in the crew are really good swimming friends of mine. I was the particular swimmer for this what was a successful Channel crossing. I crewed with him for his Fastnet swim last year. I was invited actually to crew for him when he attempted the Channel, which didn't work. This swim didn't work out in the end, but in the autumn of 2020, and for reasons actually related to the pandemic, I couldn't go on the crew at the time. So when he was signed up for this year, he asked me about 18 months ago, would I go on the crew this time, and without hesitation I signed up. And then the other crew members are really good swimming friends, one of whom actually is this swimmer's wife, and she was in charge of the crew and the planning for the whole thing. And then the other swimmer, but both the other crew members are English Channel soloists, so very familiar, obviously having swam it, but also having crewed for multiple other swimmers. So I was definitely, when it came to the English Channel and English Channel crewing and so on, I was the neophyte in this one. So it was great to do it with people who were friends and very experienced at this. So it was a real privilege from that perspective.
How did the timing work for you with windows and waiting in Dover for 2 weeks and going to the amusement parks and the water parks and the art museums? And
we were actually really fortunate, and the swim took place, within the scheduled window, which I've had in my diary all year. We had maybe 3-4 days notice about going, and in fact maybe a week in advance it was looking like the weather was going to cooperate, so it was kind of confirmed maybe 4 days out. And then we traveled 2 days before the swim, got to Dover that evening. We then had the day before, the day of the swim, and the day after. The weather was beautiful for each of the days. We had a very relaxed kind of day before the swim. We went to visit Farn Ridge, just had a look around, lunch, prepared for the swim, got in supplies, etc. It was all very relaxed, and I mentioned we're all friendly together, so we actually had good fun that day. And so it all went according to plan. The swim was, the expected swim start time on the day in question was confirmed at about 6:30 p.m. the day before, in consultation between the swimmer and the pilot. And yeah, we turned, the meeting time was midnight on the morning of the swim. We turned up, everything worked according to plan, and we headed off, and the expected swim start time was
I'm going to stop you there, David, because I don't want you to get too far ahead of me. Dorothy, same question for you. How did you know the swimmer? How did you get yourself involved? And what was the timing of going to Dover?
So mine is a completely opposite experience. I have the dinner at Cork Distance Week to thank for my involvement. So my friends didn't save me a place at their table. And so I ended up sitting at the only available seat, which was next to this swimmer, who I already knew because he was doing Distance Week and I'd given him a lift down to Lough previously. And we were chatting about his swim, and he mentioned that he didn't have any crew. So he was a bit stuck, and he was talking about the difficulty of finding crew. And so I volunteered to be Plan B. I live part-time in London, part-time in Kinsale, so I'm often in London, and I happened to be planning to be in London the week before the swim. And so I said, look, if you're stuck, I can be your Plan B. I'm not experienced. I've never crewed the channel, but I'm happy to, stay on in London a few days and come down to Dover and crew for you if you need me. And I went from Plan B to sitting on a Zoom call within almost no time at all. So very quickly, I was part of the A team.
And then as far as the call in London, did you come down 2 days ahead of time? Did you come down in the morning? How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't need to. So Dover, for those who don't know, is less than a 2-hour drive from London. But because I hadn't been before, I had a bit of time, so I thought it might be fun to go down and just see what the Dover scene is like, what's the swimming like, visit all these places that I've heard so much about, and also to just give moral support to the swimmer who was pretty much down there on his own. Although, as everybody knows, in Dover, you just run into people everywhere anyway. So I was totally happy to go down. We thought the swim was going to be, I think, on Wednesday. And so I was planning to head down on Tuesday morning. And then the word came on Tuesday, it might be Thursday. But I thought, well, look, I'll go down anyway. I've already booked this hotel, so I may as well just go down and have a swim and hang out. And yeah, it was really nice to be able to do that. But equally, it was nice to know that for future reference, it is actually very easy to just jump in the car and get down there.
And what was the story with the rest of his crew?
So he had, his original crew was a person who's been helping him, giving him advice, mentoring him, who's an International Marathon Swimming Hall of Famer. So a very illustrious guy. Now, as it turns out, he couldn't make the date that we anticipated the swim being. He was only ever really available the first couple of days of the window. But happily, another illustrious swimmer who's incredible swimmer and International Marathon Swimming Hall of Famer as well. She stepped in, and she herself is a channel swimmer. Well, she's swum everything, and just an incredible person with vast experience. So we only had 2 crew. So I was very happy that the other crew member was somebody of such experience and knowledge. I'm not sure I would have been as comfortable if the other person was as inexperienced as me.
David, tell us about the actual swim now, from the moment the boat pulled away from the dock in Dover to the conclusion.
Okay, so it was a long swim. It was a long day. So yeah. So we left the dock at about, I don't know, about 1:30. Got around to so what's the name of the beach that
Shakespeare or Sapphire?
Yeah, I think it was the latter. Yeah,
Sapphire Home.
I think, yeah, actually, yeah, I must double check that. But anyway, it was 2:15 in the morning, so everything was dark and so on. But the conditions were very good, and there were actually 9 boats out that day, and they pretty much all started at that time. So it was actually really quite busy. You could see the boats, the lights, and so on. The next one a couple of 100 meters away, and another one a couple of 100 meters beyond that, and the same on the other side, etc. And I think if I remember correctly, there were 8 soloists and 1 relay that day. But the conditions were very calm. There was kind of a gentle roll, and I'm going to mention now that the first several hours of the swim, I was really seasick, and I've never been seasick in my life before. And I don't know, was it the early morning, and it was this kind of very gentle rolling. So top tip for all crew forevermore: take seasickness tablets before you get on the boat, no matter how calm it is.
And practice with them the week before.
Practice with them the week before. Thanks, Ned. Yeah. So anyway, the seasickness passed, and like the swimmer started at 2:15, swam well and strong, good swimming conditions, beads were on time. But the pilot was our pilot was really experienced, very calm guy, and another guy on board with him along with the observer, and they were all really experienced, really calm about the whole thing. And we just kind of got going. Lovely sunrise. Our swimmer was going well, feeding well, making good progress, and swam through very good conditions for hours. There was a period for about an hour and a half near the separation zone. So we were about maybe 6, 7, 8 hours into the swim, where there were a lot of jellyfish, and our swimmer got stung several times. And that kind of passed then, that area of jellyfish, and our swimmer was really making good progress. We got to maybe the 11 to 12 hour mark, and the one kind of adverse piece of the forecast was that it was likely that the wind was going to come up in the latter part of the day.
We call that it will freshen up.
Freshen up, yeah. Well, I can tell you that it really freshened up. I mean, really. And we're talking about this. The wind started to come up, I'd say about 4 p.m. We thought it might have been a little bit later, that our swimmer would have made more progress through the calm part of the day. But the wind really came up, and it came up at a time when the tide slackened and then turned. One of the other crew members at about the 6 hour mark got in a support swimmer and swam for about an hour, and around about the 11 hour mark and the 13 hour mark I did 2 1 hour stints with the swimmer as well. So I had the really great experience of swimming within the channel, which I enjoyed very much, and the water temperature was good, and it was just a nice experience. But the wind was coming up for that second hour. Conditions were really quite difficult, and then a combination of the wind and the turning tide presented a real challenge, and our swimmer was making very little progress.
Was his stroke rate deteriorating? Was he complaining? Was he?
No.
Was his wife insulting him, slapping him, telling him he's wonderful? What was the dynamics like?
The dynamics were that everything was really steady. Our swimmer was, and I don't mind saying it in this, I'd say it to his face, everything. He was absolutely heroic throughout the day. He literally kept going. Stroke rate was really consistent for the day. He never complained. The progress was very slow, and we were being pushed up and down the coast. I mean, Cap Green A was a kilometre to the left 1 minute, and 20 minutes later it was a kilometre to the right. And I might be slightly exaggerating, but it really was like that. And he never ever complained, stopped, took his feeds, carried on, one arm in front of the other, strong, consistent stroke rate. It was just the combination of the wind and the tide turn and so on. It was a real learning experience for me. It was just really challenging. And we were talking about the final kind of, if I have my memory correct on this, the final kind of 5K took 5 or 6 hours. So really difficult. And when you look at the track of the swim afterwards, you can see this parallel to the coast swimming going on and so on. But I think we stuck with it. Our swimmer, who's by disposition a very realistic chap, asked after about 14 hours for a genuine download and what the situation was. The pilot had been working on a couple of strategies to work through. He had come up with a fresh one just before our swimmer had asked for that download. We told him that there was good prospects to keep swimming. He'd be directed, follow the boat, etc. And he did. It took another couple of hours, but he did it and landed at Cap Green A, and he was accompanied into the finish by his wife, which was really lovely. And he finished the swim. It was nearly 17 and a half hours. Really amazing. And there are very fast swimmers and swimmers who get ideal conditions, and you hear of 10 and 11 and 12 hour times and so on. But I was just really admired the grit and determination to keep going for 17 and a half hours and finish the swim. It was amazing, actually.
And besides swimming twice, did you do anything useful?
Me, after I got over my seasickness, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you work the kettle? Did you hold up a sign? Did you?
Yeah, prepared feeds, held up signs, spoke to the swimmer, eyes on the swimmer. I actually kind of, the other two were much more experienced and so on. So I tried as best I could to do what I was told, and made the odd mistake. But it was an experienced crew, and we all know each other, and it was I think it worked really quite harmoniously. When the wind came up, it was very, very rough on the boat, and the particular boat is quite tall. So we were really thrown around a bit on the boat, and there were some pretty big waves came along and so on. So that was entertaining, and each time it happened, you kind of think, Jesus, how's the swimmer surviving this? But he did. He kept going. It was great.
And
he
when
did.
when the swimmer got back to the boat, was he dancing around in elation? Was he curled up in a fetal position? Was he throwing up? Was he saying, "I want to swim back"? Was he saying, "Never again"? Was he blaming his wife?
Yeah, he wasn't saying I want to swim back, nor was he saying never again. He was very pleased to do it. He was very, very tired. Yeah, he threw up a bit. But funnily enough, the official report came through this week, and he had 34 feeds, and that's 34 feeds of this sugary carbohydrate kind of crap, that we all drink in these longer swims. And so throwing up, I think not only was it understandable, but I think it was the best strategy. Get rid of the stuff. But no, he was really pleased to have done it. He was really tired. Yeah, he slept well that night, and he was in very, very good form the next day, and really, really pleased to have done it. It was the second attempt. The first one didn't work out, so it made it particularly special. And he had really, really shown extraordinary grit and determination to finish the swim in the final. The conditions that were there for the final third. So yeah, just it was brilliant.
Did you bring him to a pub with a pen?
Yes, we
afterwards?
did. Yes, we did. Actually, it was one of the things about Dover. We went to the White Horse, the famous White Horse, and he did this thing on the wall and so on. But the thing that struck me about the White Horse is that aside from all this channel swimming, legendary stuff on the walls, it was very interesting to read it and so on. It's a really, really nice pub. So yeah, really nice English pub, old pub. So that was good too, and it was really, really good for all of us to just watch him English Channel soloist up in the wall.
And you all then flew back to Cork. Was there a reception at the airport for you?
There was, Ned. Yeah. We got back that evening, and we were on the late flight, so we got in about midnight, and there were maybe 20, 25 people from the local swimming community there to greet him home, and which was really nice, including your good self, Ned. And you, Dorothy, you were there. Yeah. So it was really a nice experience, and I'm sure it'll be a great memory for him in years to come.
Dorothy,
He's in a house where it's a couple who both swam the channel. That's pretty unusual, I'd say.
Yeah. Dorothy, we'll go to you now on your from the moment maybe even before the boat left the pier.
So unlike David, I experienced the full, what they call the Dover coaster idea, and that is, waiting on your swim, eyes on the weather from the window opens Monday, and it's like, not today, maybe tomorrow, and it's basically every 12 hours the pilot looks at the weather again and takes a view for the next day or so. So quite difficult, I think, for the swimmer to stay focused, not panic that they're going to lose their chance, and also not panic that the training they have done is starting to sort of wear away in some way. So the first few days we were fine. The swimmer was pretty relaxed. I don't think he ever expected to go out in the first couple of days, because there was a relay anyway ahead of him. He was spot number 2. But when it started coming, when Wednesday was called off or not confirmed, I think he did start to worry a little bit, because we could see in the forecast that the end of the week really wasn't looking very good. So it was going to be Thursday or Friday or not at all. Now, the interesting thing for me in all of this was the I noticed there's a big decision between reviewing conditions on Monday and reviewing conditions on Friday. So I think on Monday, you think you've got the whole week ahead of you. So perhaps you are waiting for good conditions and optimal conditions, if at all possible. I think when you get towards the end of the week, then there's an element of pressure now because there's a possibility it won't happen at all. And I wonder if that doesn't make people, think about going out, in less than optimal conditions. I mean, sometimes they just don't have a choice. Now, in this case, we actually ended up with being weathered off, except that we had already started. So I think of it as a delayed decision not to go. It was never going to be more than 50-50. The pilot kept us informed the whole way. The night before, which was the Thursday night, the pilot had said it was 50-50, but be ready to go on Friday and we'd see. So we assembled at noon on Friday, and the plan was to start swimming at about 1 from Samphire Hole. There were 3 boats out that day. One was a relay, and one was another solo attempt. So the forecast, it wasn't looking great. It was very, very overcast. It was very windy, but the forecast was for the wind to drop, let's say at around 2 o'clock, about an hour, which would have been about an hour into the swim. So we headed off to Samphire Hole, and even in Samphire Hole, conditions were really quite challenging. Very, very rough in the water. But, the swimmer wasn't bothered at all. And I don't quite recall a moment where we said, okay, you're going. But, the co-pilot started counting down the time, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, so on. And before we know it, the swimmer's in the water swimming over to the beach. And from there, really, it turned out to be really just effectively a practice swim. I mean, the conditions just deteriorated. It stopped raining, but the wind really picked up, and the waves were well over a meter tall. We were being thrown around on the boat. The swimmer was completely oblivious to this, I think. He was just swimming along, swimming incredibly well considering the conditions, getting slapped from one side the whole time. We tried to get him to swim a little bit in the shadow of the boat to sort of lessen the impact of the waves, but he didn't seem bothered at all. He looked really strong, he looked quick, and actually seemed quite comfortable. He knew like these would be the conditions for the first, let's say, hour or two. So we did the first feed, which was okay, except that I had to sort of crawl on my hands and knees to get the bottle ready because the boat was tipping over so much. He took the first feed and he was fine. It was nice and quick. And literally within 5 minutes.
All right, Dorothy.
The sound's gone. Is it back now?
No, you're okay.
Sorry. I don't know how that happened. Yeah, so literally within 5 minutes of the first feed, the pilot came up to me and he said, look, this is the situation. The conditions are terrible. The weather currently is not doing what the forecast said it would. So he said, the wind might drop and it might not drop. He said, obviously your swimmer's going great. He's just started. He looks terrific. But if the weather is still like this in 3 or 4 hours time, then we'll be going back to Dover, no matter what he looks like in the water, because it simply isn't safe at that point, especially heading into, dusk and so on. So he was fantastic. He said, look, I want to be fair to the swimmer. I feel like we've really only started. I don't think the weather is right. If we were in the harbour now, I'd be saying no. So he said, I'm going to give him a choice. Basically, he can either go back now, in which case we just count it as a practice. It doesn't cost him anything. And I'll try and get him out again in the next available window, which realistically will be 10 days, 2 weeks, because the following week was looking terrible. He said, or he can carry on swimming, but if in 3 hours time or so, the conditions are still like this, we'll be going back to Dover, and it doesn't matter how well he's doing at that point, we'll be going back. And at that point, then then it's a DNF and he loses his money. So he asked us to think about it and, put this to the swimmer, perhaps on the next feed or something. So it was really interesting because, of course, two things. First of all, neither the main crew nor I knows the swimmer particularly well. So we were a bit unsure as to how he's going to take it. Second of all, we hadn't discussed this scenario at all. It never crossed our contemplation that this would happen. I mean, it's an unusual scenario, to be fair, but actually, I don't think we ever discussed even the process that we would go through, say, later in the swim, if there was a conversation about ending the swim. So a big learning point for me was it's worth having like a dry run of a lot of different scenarios with the swimmer before you start off. So in the end, we decided, the main crew and I both felt that from our knowledge of the swimmer, and if it were us, we'd rather go back knowing that he doesn't live that far away and he can probably come back in 10 days or 2 weeks without any difficulty. It's a few hours away. And, we felt like if it stopped after 4 hours, he would feel really robbed of his opportunity and gutted after all his training. So, and I think that's what the captain was leaning towards as well, although he was incredibly good about it. And he certainly wasn't going to tell us, what to do. He was really, really good. Took a long time to explain it and gave us a lot of leeway in terms of taking a little bit of time to think about it and talk to the swimmer about it. So we agreed then that the lead crew would be the one to talk to him, even though I probably knew him a bit better, but mainly because I felt that's information you want to hear in your native tongue rather than in English. And so so she on what might have been the next feed. I mean, I was standing there with the feed bottle, but so on the next feed, so we're like an hour and a half in. She explained the situation to him, and he basically said, "Well, what do you think?" And we said, "Well, we'd get out. That's if it were us, we'd get out." And so he was really good about it. He just said, "Okay, fine, I get out," and he got out. And I mean, he was gutted. Obviously, he was gutted, and I think he also was fearful in some way that it reflected on his swimming, because invariably you sort of think, if I were a different swimmer, would the pilot have the same concerns? But of course, it wasn't about him as a swimmer. It was about general safety, safety of the crew, safety on the boat, finding yourself in the middle of the channel in pitch darkness, in those conditions would have been very scary. So I think that was his concern, but otherwise he was pretty sanguine about it. I guess, going into it that this is a possibility, even though you hope it will never happen. And, we're still close enough that he might actually do the swim again in the next week or two. There were two other boats. The relay went back just before us, and the other soloist decided to continue on. Now, she was in a slightly different position, I would say, in that she was coming from Boston. So there was no possibility for her of, and I understand they had a very similar conversation with their pilot. But the problem for her was she'd come from Boston. So she wasn't in a position to, possibly swim 10 days or whatever later. And happily, as it turns out, the wind did drop. I mean, it took a while. Bit later than the forecast had said. The wind did drop and she made it across in like 12 and a half hours, which was fantastic. So, two different experiences, but then, as I said to the swimmer, you can really only make the decision based on what's happening at the time. And, I said to him, the wind might drop, and if it drops, it doesn't mean we made the wrong decision, because we don't know at this point. And it could go either way. It was really a 50-50 thing. So that was the end of the swim. So off we went back to shore with all those feed bottles still full and, lugging all that kit out again. So it was a bit flat, but I would say the mood was good afterwards. We all went out for supper, that evening. And I think people were feeling quite positive. I think felt it was the right decision and were optimistic about having another go.
So a couple of observations. The worst crew you can have in the English Channel swim is one person who knows nothing about the English Channel and knows nothing about your swimming or nothing about you. That's the worst scenario. The best scenario is the scenario that David was involved with, where you've got a couple of very experienced people who have swum and crewed, and everybody on the boat knows you and in a strange way absolutely loves you, even if they're not married to you. So when you look up at the boat, there's always one set of eyes loving you, that absolutely concerned about you and know you well. That's the best possible crew. So your swimmer had a crew with one incredibly experienced, but didn't really you didn't kind of know him well. The other observation I would make is that one of the most soul destroying things imaginable is to sign up for the English Channel 1, 2, 3 years ahead of time, do all the training, go to Dover and not get wet. That's absolutely one of the most soul destroying things. And I've known people that we've never heard from them again. They've disappeared from the sport. In the case of your swimmer, the swimmer got wet, got in the water, and the professionalism of the pilot clearly had explained to him, a reasonable take on what the weather's like. No one can tell you what it's absolutely going to be like in 3 hours. And commercially was quite fair or generous with the swimmer to say, okay, it's only been an hour and a half, whatever. Let's go back and you get a makeup on it. Let's hope the swimmer gets back in this year. Otherwise, he's going to be grumbling all winter about.
One thing that occurred to me in that scenario was I would advise anybody to have a plan B swim lined up, something lesser, something that you can, because it's very anticlimactic to do all that training and have such a long season and then not get your swim. So I would say to anybody, if it's all possible, to even a casual swim, these guys, might be a 20K somewhere, but have some kind of plan B swim lined up where if things don't work out on the day, you can at least get in the water and test your training a little bit.
We did a video, which is on the IMSHOF YouTube channel a couple of months ago about mental health and the sport. And we talked about, you've now done the channel and you wake up in the morning and you have no goals and you can fall into a depression, or you didn't make it or you didn't get wet and you can fall into depression. And we talk about this, really important to have this next thing lined up. And we also talked about the real importance of your family and friends and swimming colleagues to grab you a couple of days afterwards and make sure you reconnect with your swimming buddies. And I think it's really tough for somebody who doesn't have swimming buddies, who's been training all alone in a duck pond in Iowa or something. And then you don't have that support system. So I'd like to thank you both for volunteering to help folks see their aspirations through to the end, and thank you very much for the time during the interview.
Great, thanks, Ned. Thanks, Dorothy.
Thanks.
If you like this interview and this video, we have more than 100 videos on the IMSHOF channel, and in a second you'll get a chance to subscribe to that and also see the contacts. So thank you very much.